How the Cajun people came to be is not the only thing that's unique about our culture. We also have music and food, and the most unique thing of all is our language. Now, before we begin, from here on out, I'm going to refer to the French spoken in France as native French, because we did have quite a few native French speaking citizens in and around the New Orleans area. So when the Acadians came and they started intermingling with the native French speakers, you also had quite a few other cultures that the Cajuns mixed in with. As I've previously talked about in our last video about our Cajun history, there were German and Irish and Native Americans that were here, but there was also the African American community that was here as well, and English. They did have quite a few people that spoke English. So when the Acadians got here, they started intermingling and intermarrying into all of these cultures that were already here in the state of Louisiana, giving rise to the Cajun language. The Cajun language is not a pure French. It's got German words, Native American words, it's got Irish words, and if you know which ones to listen for, you'll be able to pick them up. You also have quite a few English words in the language, which makes it very unique and very interesting. But there's also something that I find interesting that I've talked to my mother about multiple times. She didn't really want to take part in the video, so I'm going to tell her story through my eyes. When I was growing up, we only spoke English. We weren't speaking French in our house, even though my mother and my father spoke French, and her parents and her spoke French. She grew up speaking French. So when they started telling us as 8 and 9-year-olds, we had to start learning how to speak French. We had to have an hour every day during school to learn the French language. We didn't understand that as kids. And I'm thinking, oh, that's going to be great because my mom speaks French. I can bring my homework home and she'll be able to, help me out. Well, it turns out when I got home and started asking for help, she didn't understand what was being said. She didn't understand the native French language. By the time she was speaking Cajun French, the French she spoke had changed so much over the centuries that it wasn't exactly native French. Now, a lot of people will say different to what I'm saying, because they did have a few gentlemen that served in World War II, ended up stationed in France and could speak to the native population there because, they all say French is French. Well, I'll tell you the truth. Creole French that's spoken here in Louisiana, that is actually closer to native French than the Cajun French language is. Cajun French, again, has a lot of mix of other words and a lot of English mixed into that. So my mom didn't exactly understand a lot of what I was learning. And the sad part is, when she was growing up, she was not allowed to speak French, along with a lot of other kids her age and a lot of people within the 30s, 40s, and 50s here in Louisiana. There was a concerted effort to stop the Cajun French speakers from speaking French. Anybody who spoke French, even if you spoke Creole French, you were not allowed to speak French. The idea was English only. You could not speak French. But my mom was lucky. She came across quite a few people in school who, they were older kids, but they understood the Cajun French language because they spoke it at home, but they also could speak English. So they taught her how to speak English as a 6-year-old child, and it just went from there. If they would have allow us as Cajun people to go ahead and continue to speak our language, then you wouldn't have an entire generation that doesn't understand the language at all. I would sit and listen to my mom, my dad, and her parents speak in French, and I didn't understand what was being said. We were taught native French in school. I didn't understand what was being said. So by the time I'm finally out of school, they came up with the idea of French immersion classes here in Louisiana. You have every subject taught in French except for English. English is taught in English because you have to know how to punctuate and all that. But if we would have had something like that when I was growing up, it would probably be a little bit easier. I would be a little bit better of a French speaker. But maybe if I had sat and listened to my parents and my grandparents speaking Cajun French, I would actually understand a lot of what's being said. And it makes me sad that my grandfather, my mom's dad, only spoke Cajun French. He only understood French. He didn't understand English. And I didn't understand French. So we could not really communicate unless my mother was right there. My biggest regret is not being able to speak to him in Cajun French. I wish I could have. I really do. The Cajun language almost died in the state of Louisiana if it wouldn't have been for Codafil. That's an organization that was formed in the 60s to help bring the Cajun culture and Cajun language back into schools. And it wasn't until when I was like 8 years old or so that they managed to get French teachers to come and teach French to the kids. It was only an hour a day. Now you have French immersion classes that you can have your kid in order for them to speak French. But I just wish I was able to speak my native language, Cajun French. I would have been able to speak to my grandfather. And that's why the Cajun language is so personal to me, because of my grandfather. I may be getting a little sentimental here, but he died before I could ever have a decent conversation with him. That's why this video is a little bit important to me. I hope you enjoyed my rant. Sorry about that if it went too long. If you enjoyed this video, you might enjoy the video about the history of the Cajun people. I'm going to link it in the description box below, or you can click on the video right here and learn a little bit more about who we are as a culture. Remember to bring some joy, laughs and smiles to somebody's day, and we will see you in our next video. Later.